За бид нар Сингапур улсад ирээд Сингапур улсыг бол бид нар маш олон зүйлээр мэднэ. Сингапурын хөдөлмөрийн зах зээл бол нэлээд тийм чөлөөтэй. Залуучууд энд ирж ажиллаж өөрсдийнхөө мэдлэг ур чадвараар өсөлддөг. Бид мэдээж энд Параг Ханна гэдэг Сингапурын BQA-ны их сургуулийн доктор, багш, зохиолч, судлаач. За маш олон засгийн газруудад бас эдийн засгийн стратегийн асуудлаар зөвлөгөө өгдөг. Бас л энэ шинэ зууны нэлээд сэтгэлгээний хувьд одоо юу гэдгийг тэргүүлж байгаа тийм залуу хүнтэй уулзахаар ирчээд байна. Бидний ярих сэдэв бол ойлгомжтой. Connectivity буюу энэ холболтын тухай байгаа. First of all, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I bring your book in the Mongolian language. Recently, it's published in Mongolia. Yeah. Mm-hmm. On the first page of this connectivity book, you say that you are so interested in maps and from the childhood. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to start our interview, of course, with the map. How it looks like, which one reflects all the achievements of the humanity in modern world.
Exactly. And the purpose of connectography, which is a new word that I invented, it's the fusion of connectivity and geography. When we think of geography, we usually think of nature, natural geography. But most of our traditional maps are maps of political geography, where we show borders, where we show division. So the kind of map that's missing is the map of connectivity. And connectivity is the achievement of mankind. It's the greatest achievement. And it is also the greatest trend in the world today, is building more and more infrastructure that connects us. So the maps that embody this connectivity are the maps that I made for this book. And that is connectography. The technical term for it is functional geography, not natural geography, not political geography of divisions, but functional geography of connections. That's what it's all about.
You also said that connectivity is the new meta pattern.
Yeah.
Yes, which can change the world, like freedom, like capitalism. Mm-hmm. What that means?
Well, it's a pattern in that it is something very robust. If you look over thousands of years, connectivity is the most dominant pattern, because connectivity and globalization, they survived wars, crusades, plague, financial crisis, every obstacle of history, and still there is more and more and more connectivity. So it is truly robust. We have more connectivity, wider connectivity, deeper connectivity than ever before. So it really is the meta pattern. Now the question is, what do we do with it? What principles are empowered because of connectivity? Is it capitalism? Is it democracy? Is it something else? And that depends on where you go in the world, right? In some places you see that technological connectivity promotes democracy, promotes freedom. One of the trends that I talk about in the book is devolution. More connectivity means that more power spreads locally. So cities, the rise of cities in the world is because of devolution and because of population spreading into cities. And those cities are more connected to each other, so they do not need the central government to determine whether they will be connected, to whom they will be connected. They want to control their own connectivity. So the independence movement in Scotland or in Catalonia, Barcelona, and these places is directly related to connectivity. So connectivity promotes devolution, number one, guaranteed. That is a law, right? The reason we have so much more independence for cities, autonomy for cities, power for cities, is because we have more connectivity between cities. So that is unshakable. So that's an example of a principle that benefits from connectivity, is devolution.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
The reverse, it's like connectivity is like more connection, yeah?
Right.
Okay. You said also like there is the great supply chain war.
Yes.
What's that mean?
The Great Supply Chain War is the result of worldwide connectivity in global value chains. the distribution of production or of markets for any commodity or good is truly global. Even in the production of particular, especially technology goods, you have design in one place, prototyping in one place, manufacturing in many places, distribution everywhere, insurance, repair, after-sales services, secondary markets, all are global and distributed, right? So the great supply chain war is the competition to keep as much of the value from that. So the famous example is the iPhone. The iPhone costs $900, but $800 of the value goes to Apple in California because the design element is the most valuable. About $1 goes to the Chinese workers who make it because putting it together is easy. A robot can do it, right? So the question now with the great supply chain war is China is saying, actually, you should do more of the work for the design, the development, the parts should be done in China. Now, India is saying the same thing. India said to Apple, if you want to sell Apple phones directly in India, you must procure 30% of the components from Indian companies. Use an Indian screen, use an Indian chip, use an Indian camera, right? So that we, India, get more of the value added from the supply chain. So that's an example of tug of war. We are connected to each other, we are trading with each other, we are investing with each other, but I want more of the rope. In global commodities markets, you can see a very similar thing. Lots of countries produce copper. There are several countries that have lithium. There's lots of oil producers. There's more natural gas than ever before, right? And America has had the shale energy revolution. So America is now one of the largest oil and gas producers in the world. What is tug of war in energy markets? Who gets to be the supplier? At what price? So you can see that Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Russia, they are competing to lock in contracts with Malaysia, Indonesia, Korea, Japan. They want to be the main supplier to those countries because then they will have guaranteed long-term revenue. So in every kind of good or service in the world, there is a tug of war to control the value and the profit from that. And that is the global supply chain tug of war.
In the past, the war is like two countries fight each other.
Over land. In the past, we fight over land. Today, we mostly fight over connectivity.
It's like over the time, it will be like a traditional war. It's like
it will be part of war. It is part of war. Cyber war is connectivity war. We have cyber war every day. There are cyber attacks. One country is trying to steal another country's or company's data, technology, engineering plans, software. That's cyber war. That's connectivity war. So we already live in a world of connectivity wars. The world of connectography is a world of connectivity wars, but it's also a world in which the division of labor comes to life, where we optimize the economic principles of optimizing land, labor, and capital, right? So I believe, and also, of course, the distribution of resources that can be shared around the world as well with maximum efficiency. So there's positive sides. There's no reason to have a resource war. In the years when OPEC controlled oil supply, they could say, we will embargo America. No oil to America. Prices go up. Today, if OPEC decides to cut production, America will say, okay, we'll raise production, right? China has been getting much of its oil from the Arab countries of the Middle East. But today, the fastest growing source of oil imports to China is America across the Pacific Ocean. And America is not going to embargo exports of oil to China. It wants to sell oil to China. So it's win-win. If you did not have connectivity of energy markets, if you did not have more investment in the infrastructure of oil terminals and refineries, right? If you did not have these geographies of supply and demand connecting, you would have vulnerability. So the more connectivity we have, the less vulnerability we have in some areas, like resource distribution. Food as well. If I can quickly get food from India to Mongolia, right, or from Russia to Egypt, then there will be less volatility in the price of food. But there's a downside, like financial crises, cyber war. Right? All of our markets are connected. All of our currencies are connected. All of our banking systems are connected. If you have a collapse in the mortgage market in America, suddenly you have a debt crisis in Europe, right? And of course, cyber war. So there's positives and negatives.
If you close all the doors, what happens in the modern world?
It's not possible. It's not possible. And I asked myself this question when I was writing the book. You know, what are the minimum sets of items for survival that we must exchange with each other, that we do not have on our own? So here we are sitting in Singapore. Singapore grows zero food. Can you live without food? No. Singapore has zero fuel. Can you live without fuel? No. So this is the most open economy on earth, is this country, because it cannot survive without food or fuel or water. It must import those things. Now, we live in a world of 200 countries. 75 years ago, there were only 50 countries. So actually, the average size of a country in the world has gotten smaller. But the population of the world has tripled. There are 8 billion people today. There were just under 3 billion people in 1945, or about 3 billion people. So we are more people in smaller countries. How can we close our borders? How will any of us survive? All of us import food. Every country on the planet Earth imports food, right? Most countries import fuel. Many countries have to import water. Most countries also have to import capital. They have to import technology, right? Who invents the iPhone and mobile phones? Only about 6 countries, right? Make lots of phones, right? Very simple. So are we really closing borders? Not really. People, the number one most important dimension of globalization is people. The original globalization is just migration, people moving. Today, there are more than 1 billion people crossing borders every year, more than ever before. Today, there are 300 million people who live outside of the country that they came from, more than ever before. Today, we have labor shortages for high-tech workers, for elderly care, nannies, maids, construction workers, cleaners, carpenters, automobile repairmen. Shortages in Europe, shortages in America, shortages in Canada. How will these jobs get done? You have to actually import more people. So a lot of people today are talking about borders going up, protectionism, populism, walls. The truth is, it never works.
What's about the globalization? Some people say it's like a new way of the colonization.
Globalization as colonization. It's interesting. Globalization, every wave of globalization historically is promoted by an empire. Rome builds its roads outward, right, so that it can trade but also conquer neighbors. The Mongolians were the greatest patrons of globalization of the medieval world, right? Largest empire in history, supported globalization amongst Arabs, Persians, Turks, Chinese, Indian, Mongol, Russian, right? All of the empires participated, all of the civilizations participated in the Mongolian globalization. But would it happen without the empire? No. Empire promotes globalization. Today we have an American empire. It promoted globalization for the 20th century. Today we have a Chinese empire, and it promotes globalization, trade with China, take money from China. We also have a European globalization. Europe trades more with other regions than any other region in the world. So we have many centers of power, many empires. All of them want to globalize. So globalization is very strong. But is it colonialism? Not really. If you think about the European colonialism of the 18th century, 19th century, early 20th century, that was also political control. Right? Today, of course, we have a financial globalization where there is a lot of dependency. Many countries depend on the US dollar. Many countries have debt to China. There are dependencies. But those countries are not slaves. Right? I come from India originally. India was a colony of Britain. Today, India is an independent country. Its GDP is much bigger than England, right? Theresa May, the Prime Minister of England, has to go to India and beg for a free trade agreement with her former colony, right? This is a different world. People talk about Chinese globalization, Chinese trade with Africa, and they say this is a new colonialism. It's not. Africa wants to sell to China. Africa is getting a very high price for everything it sells. In colonialism, what did they used to do? You go in with a gun, you take it, and you give the locals nothing. So this is not colonialism, right? You can have corruption, you can have bad governance, bad policies, wasted resources, inefficiencies. But that's not the fault of China. They didn't force you to do that. So we need to appreciate the new dynamics. I don't like the historical analogies that are wrong.
It's very funny, like during our time, we can see America wants to protect, China wants to integrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big change. But actually, I think the truth is that America is becoming more like China, and China is becoming more like Europe. State capitalism, state-run capitalism, government collusion in markets, strong domestic industries with government subsidies, that's a European invention. That's Europe today. They still do it, right? Very strongly rooted industries with strong government support, lots of public financing that takes away the cost for the company to provide pensions and these other things, right? China learned it from Europe. China is the country today celebrating Marxism, right? The German philosopher. He celebrated more in China than in Germany, right? So a lot of what China is doing is inspired by Europe. Now, America is starting to bail out industries, right? Re-regulate certain sectors, and it's doing things that Europeans basically have been doing. So actually, it's like a convergence. What America is doing is kind of, you would say, soft protectionism. But that's what Europe has always been doing. That's what China has always been doing. So it's not that they're switching positions. You know, China used to be protectionist, now it's free market. America used to be free market, now it's protectionist. Actually, Europe and China have always been protectionist to some degree, right? While also supporting their companies, export credits, you know, subsidies to globalize. And now America is learning to play the same game. That's, I think, what's happening.
It's going better or worse?
Well, I think that to have domestic stability, you have to protect certain things. In America and in Canada both, they say it's the farmers. The farmers are an important constituency. There are very few farmers in America, right? It's less than 2% of the population. There's very few farmers in Canada. But it's the distribution, it's the lobbying system, it's the corporate role. They push for certain subsidies and protections. So right now, America is attacking Canada, saying, you know, your dairy subsidies are very high in Canada, because Canada is protecting its milk farmers, right? It's not bad to take care of your people. If your country depends on a certain good, maybe it's dangerous to allow the free market to control it. What if there's zero restrictions on investment? I mean, you are Mongolia. You protect certain industries. You don't allow China or Russia to buy 100% of your mining industries, right? That's dangerous. This is your strategic resources. So every country today is saying, what are our strategic resources? It's fine to trade. It's good to trade. We need investment. We need exports. But which people do we have to protect? Which sectors do we have to protect to make sure that we can control how it is governed, to make sure the resources aren't wasted, to make sure the money is not offshored, to make sure there is reinvestment in our economy? What do we need to do and protect to remain stable domestically? And that's the job of government. The perfect world is not necessarily a world in which there are no borders. And of course, this is what people say about me. They say, oh, he believes the world should be borderless. I say, no. Actually, the perfect world has the maximum number of borders. Because we have peace today because we have 200 countries. When we had 50 countries, we fought a lot. The world will only be stable when everyone feels that they control their local environment, right? When they feel that they are not dependent on others. But that is also when the world will be the most open, because we'll have 200, 300 countries and none can survive on their own. Everyone will have to trade and invest with each other to survive. And that's the world we're actually moving towards. So it's the maximum number of borders with the maximum openness at the same time. That's the paradox at the heart of this book, is that if you believe in a free world, if you believe in an open world, if you believe in an economically integrated world, then you should have the maximum number of political units, none of which can survive alone.
It's kind of blockchain.
Yeah, it's blockchain.
Yes.
Blockchain geopolitics.
Yes. Okay, I want to talk about this China's new initiative, Belt and Road.
Yes.
Yeah, it's mostly about connectivity. Yeah, and also they're trying to change this PRD area, the one whole, maybe it's the biggest in the world city. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you see in the 5 or 10 years there for the next?
The Pearl River Delta story really begins in the 1970s. You know, in the 1970s, when Deng Xiaoping declared that Shenzhen would be China's first special economic zone, he liberalized certain regulations, invited foreign investment. They had some private business activity, and now Shenzhen is as rich as Hong Kong, and they're very close to each other. And then in 1997, Britain gave back Hong Kong to China. So it's been 21 years now. So you had the liberalization of the Pearl River Delta economy in 1979. You had Hong Kong going back to China in 1997. And now it's almost 2020. And this Pearl River Delta region from Hong Kong through Shenzhen to Guangzhou is the largest mega city cluster in the world. Really, it's a dozen cities, 60 million people, total infrastructure integration, many tiers and industries of the economy represented. You still have textiles, you still have manufacturing, you have furniture making, automobile making, but you have the most high-tech solar companies. You have some of the most high-tech digital companies like Huawei. You have the most high-tech electric car companies as well, like BYD. They're all there in the Pearl River Delta. So, in the next 5 to 10 years, this is growing, right now. A lot can happen with politics, regulation, the currency issue with Hong Kong, the population issue with Hong Kong, pollution. There's many challenges, but right now, the Pearl River Delta is doing very well. It's a model for the rest of China. Then there's the Belt and Road. Now, I have been traveling around the countries that are getting a lot of infrastructure investment from China and from multilateral institutions for 20 years, like Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan. I've spent a lot of time there, and now these countries are really going to get much more connected. These are, again, the countries with the populations have grown so much in the last 50, 60 years, like India, like Pakistan. There are places where the governments have been very corrupt. If you look at the former Soviet republics, like Uzbekistan, you've had very bad governments. Now you have reform, rapid reforms. and in Pakistan too. So you have large populations, opening of economies, reforming of governments, new infrastructure investment, rapid urbanization, young populations. All of this is happening at the same time. And that is why Belt and Road matters. Because Belt and Road will help these countries to have a new role in the global division of labor, in the connectography world. If you think about the identity of Uzbeks or Kyrgyz or Tajiks or Kazakhs, their borders have been very artificial, right? They have been belonged to Persian Empire, Turkic Khanates, Mongol Empire, Soviet Union, right? They are landlocked countries. Their survival depends on connectivity, not on rigid borders. So many of these countries are discovering a new role in the world because of Belt and Road. Overall, it's very positive for these countries. It's very, very positive overall.
You know, as persona non grata, what do you think about like Mongolia now?
You know, I love Mongolia so much. From my very first visit, I gave my TED talk about Mongolia before I ever came to Mongolia. But you know, my conversations with the governments and the people over the last 10 years, Mongolians have said to me, you know, you gave us a warning. You know, you showed a video of China acting like the Yuan dynasty, the Mongol Yuan dynasty, moving northward and occupying Mongolia, Siberia, everything. Is that really happening? Is that our fate? Is it just Mongolia? And this is a warning. When someone tells you this, you say, okay, you know, we're fine. But I had this video, right? And the video is scary. You know, images scare people. So now I've been coming to Mongolia a lot, you know, and having a lot of conversations and talking to the government about the strategy. You are not the only landlocked country in the world. You are not the only resource-rich country in the world. I study countries like this so that there are lessons that can be shared. How do we protect our resources? How do we regulate our sectors like mining? How do we build the best infrastructure? How do we diversify our economies so that people can do different things, right, and have a productive economy? How do we have stronger governance with a long-term vision, right? How do we deal with foreign powers, with Russia, with America, with China, to balance each other? There are a number of countries in the world in this situation, like Kazakhstan and others. So for me, you know, Mongolia can learn from these countries. And as you know, I'm always trying to share those lessons, you know, with Mongolia. So I feel very welcome, you know, in Mongolia. I love Mongolia. I especially came last year just to celebrate my 40th birthday with my family and friends, because to me, from that first experience, driving the ambulance from London all the way across Russia to donate to the hospital in Mongolia, for me, it's always been a very special country.
What do you think? How can we get more benefits from this cooperation between Russia and China?
Yes, and I think that the relationship between Russia and China is going to remain strong. This is a big focus of my work right now, is Asian countries finding these complementarities with each other. China has lots of people and lots of money and is scarce on resources. Russia has lots of resources, very few people, and very little money. So it's a very complementary relationship. So you are seeing with the energy deals, you're seeing the pipelines directly from Russia to China. You're seeing the Russian railways being improved because of investment from China. The Belt and Road railways are passing mostly through Kazakhstan because it's the fastest route. But in Mongolia, you're talking about doing the steppe route, right? So having more transit there. This can be energy, this can be freight, but it can also be power connectivity. I have a belief that the Asian energy supergrid can come together. And this means the ultra-high voltage power transmission, and Mongolia can play a very important role. You have the wind power, solar power, other resources that you can start to trade more of with your neighbors. So that's one good example. You'll obviously have a lot more transit, right? So I think the value added around certain commodities, tourism, there's a number of ways in which you can benefit a lot from the power that these two countries permanently have.
One phrase from your book, it says like, there is no worse corruption than the oppressive inefficiency of societies where basic mobility is hampered by non-existent infrastructure. I like this phrase, and is there any like a reason or logic to build some special economical zones in the Mongolia?
So I think there's two issues. When I wrote that, I was reading a United Nations report, and the report said that of the 8 billion people in the world, about 5 billion people are not provided adequate services by their government. And adequate services means physical protection and safety. It means health care, basic health care, maybe transportation, infrastructure, education. You can define it a number of ways, nutrition. And I read that, I said, you know, most of the world still suffers from a major lack of basic infrastructural connectivity. Most of the world's people. So I'm thinking about most of the world's people, most of humanity, when I write that. And that is the worst form of corruption to me. How can you claim that people are free and empowered if they can't even connect to each other? Then it might as well be the Stone Age, where I have to walk everywhere and do everything myself. What is the government doing? Nothing. So to me, yes, the worst corruption in the world is not providing the platform of connectivity. You are not even a good state if you're not providing the basic connectivity. And most countries in the world, almost all countries in the world, are still struggling to do that. In America, there's a region, Appalachia, across 12 states, a mountainous region, right? From Pennsylvania all the way through Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, a lot of poverty. The connectivity is bad. So I'm not trying to be embarrassing to countries. Most countries in the world still do not provide good enough connectivity. Singapore does, Japan does, Germany does, Norway does, but very rich countries with smaller populations. It's very hard to do when you have billions of people, like India, very bad connectivity. Or when you're a huge country, like Mongolia, right? It takes work, But my point is it's the number one priority, it should be. So, is there a case for a special economic zone in Mongolia? Yes, but it depends on what issue. For example, could you have zones for mineral production, fuel refinery, where you have the latest regulatory standards, where you have also technology development around value added in that industry? Yes, absolutely. Could you do the same thing for digital services, a high-tech ecosystem? Yes, absolutely. Could you have a special economic zone for wool production, right, and textiles, and having the finest sweaters and scarves and jackets from the Mongolian sheep fur, right? Of course, you can. So you can do specialized zones in those areas to step up to the next level of quality, regulatory quality and product quality. So yes, of course, and every country is doing that, actually. So, you know, in the book I talk about how in the 1950s, there were about 5 special economic zones in the world. And today, there's about 3,500. So, of course, this is something that countries are realizing. China had 1 in 1979, Shenzhen. Today, hundreds. The United Arab Emirates, right, has 250 of these zones. Most of them are in Dubai. So why is Dubai Dubai? When we look at this city that was empty, desert. I spent my childhood there until I was 6, 7 years old. So I was a small boy in the desert, right? Today, it is the tallest building in the world, most connected airport in the world, right? Fastest growing city in the history of the whole world is Dubai today. It's because they have 150 special economic zones. And for every zone, they're saying, we want to do more investment in logistics, more in shipping, new airport, right? All of that brings in investment, people, technology, finance. All of those things came together. Oil, of course, as well. So yes, there's a good reason to do these zones.
Maybe it's like only the fastest way for the prosperity.
To get to the first world, yes. But I will say this for Mongolia. When you are a small country in population, right, you actually don't necessarily have to have one zone here, one zone here, one zone here, one zone here with different laws. Your whole country can have one standard, right? And if you raise your regulatory standards, your legal quality, your investment laws, your bankruptcy laws, arbitration laws, up to the highest level, like Singapore, you can do it tomorrow. Then you don't need any special economic zones. Your whole country becomes the zone. And that's what Singapore is, by the way. In the 1950s, Singapore was very poor. They said, well, we have to bring in investors to reclaim land from the sea. We have to fix an airport. We have to fix the seaport. Right? We need investors for these things. We have to give special laws and permissions. But over time, the whole country said, for every sector, for every investor, one standard, highest standard, best laws. And now in Singapore, there isn't one zone for this and one zone for this and one zone with different laws. One law, one country, highest standard.
Of course, I would like to ask about is there any possibility to be connected with this international supply chain from Mongolia, for the Mongolian business?
Mongolia is connected to the world's supply chains. It's connected to the world's mineral supply chains. It's connected to a very important geography of logistics and transportation supply chains. You're connected financially to the world. You're connected digitally to the world. You have a very high mobile phone penetration rate. So Mongolia is connected. A very important thing for every country to do is to measure how connected they are. In what areas? Financial connectivity, transportation connectivity, education connectivity, knowledge connectivity, and how much more do you have to do? And who are you connected to? Who should you be connected to that you are not connected to? So Turkish Airlines now has non-stop flights from Istanbul to Ulaanbaatar. They didn't have that maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's a good new connection, right? Do you need more direct flights from Frankfurt? Do you need more direct flights from Moscow? Maybe, maybe not. You have to ask and measure and see the value and pursue the most valuable connections. And that's what I think government strategy is about. That's what I work with governments to do, is to say, this is what you need to do. Map your connectivity, right? And not all connectivity is a worthwhile investment. You see in Malaysia, there was a change in government, and the government is saying, we have all of these contracts with China for a new deep water port and a new manufacturing zone and a new digital zone. And the new government is saying, some of this is too expensive. Some of this is not going to add value. Some of this is not giving enough back to our workers. You don't want to overspend on the wrong connectivity. A strategy, the responsibility of government, of the people, also is to say, what is the right connectivity for us to invest in and to make the most of it? So you can have a high-tech zone with lots of computers and 5G, internet, mobile phone and fiber optic cables. But what if you don't have a single citizen who knows how to code? What's the point? It's a holistic strategy. Your education system, your businesses, your companies, your government, your diplomatic relations, you have to align all of them. And I say this tug of war is a team sport, right? And I use this analogy a lot in the book because a team in tug of war is 6 men, 7 men, 10 men. One man is the president, one man is the parliament, one man is the business community, one man is the labor force, one man is the university. They have to work as a team. They have to pull at the same time in the same direction. That's how you succeed.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
time and for your idea, and also thank you for your book.
I hope you enjoy it.
Finally.
Yeah. I'm very proud. I'm very happy that it's in Mongolian. It's,
When is the next book?
so it's called The Future is Asia. right? So it will be released in English in February of next year. So in 7 months, 8 months. And then all of the other languages and editions will come after that. So Russian is coming, Mongolian hopefully.
Oh, thank you. This is a good one. I know this. Thank you. I really